welcome to another episode of Talk Life with me. I am so excited for this week. I'm actually excited for every week because it's something different that the Lord shows me and things that I want to share with you guys. And they can be like big things, minor things, but I just like that I'm able to come out here and just talk life. I've said it before and I'll say it again that God gives us these talents and these gifts, and if we're not using it for Him, then why do we even have these, right? So last week I spoke with my brother, my older brother. For those of you that haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go and see it. Um, I love him. I love my whole family, and I was excited that I was able to finally have him on my podcast. But this week I'm talking, I guess, about a topic that's a little bit more on the lighter side, um, meaning more like, I guess people may not consider it like a serious topic, but it's fun. Like I think it's fun. I think it's interesting, and that is the topic of pet peeves. So for those of you that don't know, a pet peeve is something that someone finds extremely annoying or really irritating. And it's also something that's very specific, but also something that's very personal. For example, something that might bother me might not bother someone else. So my pet peeve could totally be different from someone else's, and vice versa. So I did a little bit of research because I was like, okay, what are like the top pet peeves that are out there? And some of them I'm like, yep, I can relate. Like I find that annoying too. But some of them were like chewing really loudly, especially like gum. People that are like chewing super loud. Also, people that drive really slow, especially when you're supposed to be going on like a fast lane, or people that walk really slow and you're not a slow walker. I guess I can relate to that a little bit. Also, going back to like noises, like the chewing, I think another noise that people find irritating and can be a pet peeve is like cracking of the knuckles. I remember I used to do that all the time as a kid, and my parents were like, "Don't do that." And I don't know if it was because it was a pet peeve or because they're like your bones are gonna get all, um, I see. But yeah, also like when you're married, I know some of the biggest pet peeves, which thankfully I never had to go through, but with married couples, I think a pet peeve is if the guy leaves the toilet seat down or not. Or like the toilet paper. I guess there's a right or wrong way to put the toilet paper. And people find it as a pet peeve if you don't put it the right way. Um, Also, going to the movies, I think that's a very obvious one. Or going anywhere where they tell you silence your phone, turn your phone off, and people don't. I think that's a big pet peeve that could be relatable. Also, I think for the teachers is like when you're using bad grammar or like when you are texting during class, like that's a huge pet peeve for them. And then I thought to myself, I was like, okay, so I can relate to these, but what are some that are like personally to me? And I don't know if you can relate, but one of my biggest pet peeves it bothers me so much is yard sales. When your yard sale is over, like I'm a thrifter, I love finding a good treasure, a good deal. So, when I see a yard sale sign and I'm following it, like I'm turning left, I'm going right, I'm following your signs, and it leads me to nowhere. Like that just shows me that you had a yard sale and then you didn't have the audacity or like just the common sense to go, or not, it's not even common sense. It's like you didn't have like the human kindness to take off the sign, like, because I don't know when your sale's over. I mean, some people have their sales until like late in the afternoon, others don't, which doesn't matter the time. It's just if you're done with your sale, go take your signs down, because then I'm over here trying to find the deals and I can't find them. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves. Like I tell my husband all the time, like when I have my sales, like yard sales and stuff, like that's one of my biggest things. Okay, I'm done with my sale. I'm gonna go get my signs because I don't like that happening to someone else or happening to me. So I don't want to do that to someone else. And then another thing one of my biggest pet peeves, again, with the whole thrifting, when I go to thrift stores and they don't bundle like a set together. I don't know if this has ever happened to people, but like they'll have a set, like a table and chairs, and it's like a set, like that it's a furniture set, it goes together, but they have everything priced separately, which always bugs me because I'm like, what if someone literally just takes one chair because they can buy the one chair because it's labeled, it can be sold separately, and now you have a table with like one chair when it was supposed to have two, or a table with three chairs when it was supposed to have four. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like sell everything together as like a set. Like sometimes I'll go with like little bags of toys and I'll be like, oh cool, this is a set of like Power Rangers or a set of Legos or something. And then they have another bag, like they split up the set. Or the set is in like three different bags and you have to buy all three bags to get the set. Like I don't like I don't like it. Like it gets me upset. But yeah, those are like some of my pet peeves. Now, why is this important? It's important because we have to be mindful of others, of things that we can do. If we find something annoying, why are we going to do it to someone else? One of the first Bible verses that I taught my kids is Luke 6:31, which says, do to others as you would have them do to you. So treat others the way you want to be treated. And I think that definitely speaks in regards to the way you treat people, with kindness, just characteristics that you have, human interaction. If you want someone to be nice, you need to be nice, etc. But I also think it goes along those lines of, if you find something annoying, don't go around and do it to someone else. If I'm having a yard sale and I'm just gonna leave the signs. They do it to me, I'm gonna do it to them. Like that kind of mentality is not gonna get us anywhere. And same thing with like cracking knuckles. If you don't like that sound, why are you over there cracking your knuckles or chewing really loudly? You find it annoying, and then you're out there doing it to someone else. It's like these little things that it's like, I think we need to be mindful of them. But then I also thought to myself, what kind of pet peeves, if any, would Jesus have? And I definitely want to say Jesus, because Jesus was human. He was born here on earth and he felt the emotions that we felt. I would love to have read a little snippet in the Bible as to Jesus's upbringing growing up, like when he was, I know it does say a story about when he would be in the father's house, when his parents thought they lost him, but he was in his father's house. But like we don't get to see him as a teenager or as a young adult. So I think that would be so cool if we could do that. And that's just a little side note that I want to add in there. But Jesus human, he felt the emotions that we feel. He felt anger, he felt sadness, he felt joy and sorrow and grief. I think a lot of people don't realize that Jesus did things that we did. So he got tired, he slept, he cried, these different things. So I kind of got to thinking, I'm like, would Jesus have pet peeves? Do you think there are things that like annoyed him or things that like irritated him? And again, this is me just thinking, different perspective. So I think it's totally based on how you interpret the word. And so the way that I interpreted the word, Jesus said a lot of things. I love that if you have your Bible, whenever Jesus speaks, it's in red. So I don't know why, but I just love that. That way, when I'm reading, I'm like, okay, I know Jesus said this. And looking at a lot of the different texts, I think something that I found, like an underlying annoyance, I guess you could say, that I found, is that multiple times Jesus talked a lot about hypocrisy, in the sense of people would be worried more about the flaws of others than of their own. And he actually explained this. If we go to Matthew 7, verse 3 and 5, it says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So this text, it's in red. So I know Jesus said this, but this is just the fact that Jesus had to say this, and he says it in different ways multiple times. Hypocrisy. I think that is one of the biggest pet peeves that Jesus had. And he saw it on a daily basis, especially with like the scribes and the Pharisees, and people that just weren't willing to understand the word of God and take the time to really meditate on it. He said it in such a, how do you call that? It's a visual. He said it in such a visual way where I can literally, when he said that, I'm like, okay, imagine having like this big old plank in your eye, but you're noticing the smallest little detail, the smallest speck of sawdust. Like, if you guys are carpenters, which maybe you are, maybe you're not, or you know someone that is, or you've done workshop, a speck of sawdust is like the smallest, like super small. So Jesus is saying, you are focusing on that sawdust in that person's eye, and you don't see the big old piece of wood in your own eye. The fact that I can picture that, it goes to show me like the hypocrisy in it all is we're trying so hard to fix this person, to tell this person, this is wrong, don't do this, don't do that. When in reality, hey, let's look at ourselves in the mirror. What are we doing? Are we able to stand up here, to sit up here and say, oh no, I don't have any blemish, I don't have any bad details? Honestly, no. None of us are perfect. We all have something to work on. And I think that might have been another pet peeve of Jesus is judging. The fact that we judge others so quickly. I think that probably bothered him. In the book of Matthew, if we continue, chapter 15, if we go down to verse number 7, and again, this is in red, this is Jesus talking, and he is talking to the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, where he says in verse 7, you hypocrites, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen and understand. What goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them. Those verses are so jam-packed with a lot of stuff. Like we could spend weeks on just that. But what I wanted to show just on these verses is the fact that Jesus just didn't like it. And kind of like when you don't like something, when something is a pet peeve, you will consistently say, stop it. Don't do that. I don't like it. You let them know. You let the other person know that it bothers you, that it's annoying. And the fact that Jesus was able to do this, that Jesus, I mean, he didn't say, this annoys me, I'm going to say this so you guys can listen. He was such a loving and awesome Lord that the way that Jesus would say it would be in parables, would be, with these teachings. And what I love about Jesus is that when Jesus would reply, because the Pharisees were trying to like get him to, they were trying to catch him in like sin. They were trying to catch him in doing wrong. Like they were always like, hey, that's not right. Hey, that's not what the law says. Hey, hey, hey. And Jesus had such an awesome way of kind of bringing it back on them, be like, oh, okay, so you think that's wrong, let me show you what you're doing. He would say it in such a way that would really get you thinking, that would really like, okay, man, maybe I do need to check myself. Right here where it talked about these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. I was like, man, like even just this last Saturday, we had a reunion with our music ministry, our worship ministry. And one of our leaders brought the word about worshiping the Lord in spirit and in truth. And it's one thing to worship with your mouth. Like it's easy to sing it. Yeah, I'm singing it, but your heart is what truly matters. And if we go down to that same verse where we read, what goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth is what defiles them. So even what we speak, even the Lord is saying, even with what you're saying, you need to be aware with what you're saying, because the Pharisees were so worried about certain traditions and they're like, your disciples aren't doing this. And then Jesus is like, you're so worried about that you don't even realize this. Like this is even more important. And I think that just goes to show that, Jesus could have gotten annoyed. And I say could have because, again, I wasn't there. I don't know for sure. But the fact that he repeats it so many times and the fact that he uses different visuals as to how to understand that hypocrisy, judging others, quickly caring more about the flaws of someone else and not checking ourselves. Jesus didn't just say these things to say these things. There's meaning behind all of it. And when you have a pet peeve, sometimes you're able to tell the other person, hey, don't do that. I don't like that. And hopefully they'll stop. If someone's chewing really loudly or texting when they're not supposed to, or being on the phone when they're not supposed to, or cracking their knuckles, things like that. And if they stop right away, it's like, okay, great, cool. But there are other times where Like, for example, my pet peeve of people leaving the yard sale signs. There is no way I'm gonna go knocking on everyone's door. Hey, is this your sign? Hey, did you leave this sign? Like, you know, you can't do that. Or like with the store, I can tell the store all the time, hey, can you guys price everything as a set? But at the end of the day, the store's trying to make their profit. They're gonna do what they see best, what they see fit. So response. Whenever you have a pet peeve and you bring it up to someone, there's always a response. Hopefully it's a good response. Hopefully they're receptive to it. They're like, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for doing that. I didn't know it annoyed you. I'll stop. But sometimes you won't get a good response. Sometimes people get upset, like when you're driving and maybe you honk at someone because they're going too slow. Maybe they don't respond. Maybe they're not going to respond in a good way. Some people get very upset. And I think this is an interesting point of view, because if we keep reading in that same Matthew chapter 15, where he tells them what goes into someone's mouth does not defile them, but what comes out of their mouth, that is what defiles them. If we keep on reading in verse 12, it says, then the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this? So Jesus said this to the Pharisees because they were kind of telling him, hey, you're breaking tradition. Your disciples are breaking protocol. And then this is what Jesus' response is to his disciples. He says, every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be pulled up by the roots. Leave them. They are blind guides. If the blind lead the blind, both will fall into a pit. And then Peter said, explain this parable to us. And then Jesus says, are you still so dull? Jesus asked them, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come from the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. So the Pharisees were making this big old spectacle because the disciples hadn't washed their hands. They were like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. And so that's why Jesus kind of made it into a bigger thing, because the Pharisees were so worried about, you're not washing your hands, where Jesus is like, do you not even realize that what actually defiles you are these things? And he lists them. And that's why at the end he says, these things are what defiles a person, but eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. The things that he listed are way more serious than pet peeves, way more serious than annoyances. I would definitely classify these as sin, as actual sins: murder, sexual adultery, false testimony. If we look at Exodus 20, that is where we can find the 10 commandments. And when we look at the commandments, I don't believe that God left these commandments just for fun. Or he didn't leave these commandments because he's like, oh, these are just things that annoy me, so I don't want you to do it, so don't do this, please. These were not suggestions. These were commandments. There's a difference between a suggestion and a commandment. And unfortunately, we may take commandments as suggestions when they really aren't. If we love God, we follow his commandments. And are we perfect? No, absolutely not. But we don't use our imperfection as an excuse to not be like Jesus, to not follow the commandments. I once heard someone say we're not perfect, but we follow the one who is. And when we're following the one who is, when we follow Jesus, our perfect example, we try our best to follow these commandments. If we take a look at this kind of in all together, pet peeves are something that we find annoying, that we find irritating, but they're very personal. Like I mentioned, what I find annoying, someone else may not, or vice versa. But when it comes to Jesus, if he had pet peeves or not, his were not only personal, but universal. He definitely made it known that it wasn't just an annoyance. He made it known like, hey, what you're doing is not right. I'm trying to help you. Look at the bigger picture. And sometimes we need to do that. Sometimes we need to look at the bigger picture. But again, this is my perspective, something that I just thought about. I think everyone has pet peeves. There's something that bothers all of us. And then, and maybe sometimes we need to take a step back and say, why does it bother us so much? And really get to the root of it, because sometimes things that bother us shouldn't. So this was just an interesting thought that I had. Did Jesus have pet peeves? And if he did, what were they? Um, so if I had to pick, I think hypocrisy and judging others was something that he really just he wasn't having it. So this is just something that I had in my mind, something that I wanted to share. And if you want to let me know what your pet peeve is, I would be very interested to know, to make sure that I don't do what annoys you, if anything. But already, guys, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. All right, guys, have a good one.